But here's a little tour, and I will eventually, these are sort of screenshots from the modules, but I eventually will switch us over to the modules themselves, just because it makes it a little bit easier for you to see some of the interactions. But each case begins with a consent statement, basically explaining that veterinary medicine is an art. It's not an exact science, and these are certainly not meant to be a cookbook with a detailed recipe of how to treat cases. And we have to be very cautious of that because a lot of students do want that, but that is not what it's about. And so each student must accept that consent. And once they do, they're directed to select one of the 4 current cases that we have available. So a horse, a goat, a camelid, and a cow. You'll also notice that there are navigation tabs for instructions there at the top. There are also links to white papers and other resources as well. They can even click certain textbooks that will take them directly to library links for library accessible textbooks. So that's where students can access a resource and spend a lot of time reading more about things. Each case will start with a scenario of why the owner is calling. Again, based on accessibility, you can push play and you can hear a recording of our fictitious owner talking to you on the phone. And then it's followed by a series of questions that the student can then choose to ask or not ask to gain further insight on the case. We do make it to where this is sort of like a you choose book. And so you do kind of get to navigate it, but ultimately, because the branching was just so enormous of choosing which way you could go, we ultimately do have to guide the learner a little bit. And there are certain questions that we mark as mandatory that they would ask so that they can kind of get all of the whole picture of what's going on. So I'm going to switch us over real quick to the modules. Let's see if I can stop sharing and then switch my screen real quick. You should be on the scenarios now. And so once they've gone through asking those questions, are you guys seeing the right screen? Do you see a picture of my truck now?
Yes.
Okay, all right, perfect. And so the students then, after they've gathered it, they have to load their truck. So they have certain items that they can click that will be loaded on their truck, and they can keep them on the truck or not keep them on the truck. And this actually proves to be very valuable because if you fail to bring a piece of equipment with you, you can't use it later on in this scenario. So that's where things become much more interactive as well. And so after they have sort of chosen what they're going to need, and they are guided that no, you're not really going to need an x-ray potentially on this case, and so you can take that back off the truck. And so once they've done that, they'll be able to see sort of what we thought they might need, and then they can go back and add those things, or they can continue. The other thing, as they work through the scenarios that you'll see are these tabs will start popping up along this left margin. So they can go back and look at their history questions and the answers they received. They can look at their truck, and as they perform more diagnostics, those show up as well. So after they have done that, then next the learner proceeds through a series of diagnostics, which includes a physical exam where they must count the heart rate for themselves. So you can take a listen here. And if they don't know how to calculate a heart rate, there are tabs where they can reference that as well. And then they use the sliding bar to see if they got that correct. If the learner remembered the right equipment, which thankfully for you today, I did put an ultrasound onto your truck, they can perform things like an ultrasound where they can click certain areas and view photographs of images from that part of the abdomen. And there are several that could be relevant for them, as far as seeing where the kidney is and that there's not a displacement or something like that they would be concerned about. So several images throughout for them to view. And there are also instructional videos that are strategically placed throughout each of the scenarios. We have videos that include placing IV catheters in goats, passing nasogastric tubes in horses. In the cow scenario, we show them how to perform an epidural. And then as you see here, this is in the camelid one where they are performing a CSF tap. Most of our videos have sound that kind of walk them through it. This video is strictly for them to observe the procedure. I hope everyone is eating their lunch. I tried to include videos that would not be necessarily repulsive for some people that are having their brown bag lunch right now. So I'm gonna again switch back over real quick to our other screen. And so after they have, and hopefully you see that now as well. And so after they have done that, as far as working through, there are a lot of quiz questions throughout the scenarios as well. So you can see here, they've looked at a PCV and what exactly is that. And after they do that, then they narrow down their differential list. So they started with an initial, what do you think this is? And now after performing certain diagnostics, they get to narrow that differential list even further. And then eventually they will hopefully come up with their own diagnosis and then come up with their treatment plan. And then finally, they'll put together some discharge instructions or choose from an appropriate discharge instruction. And then that would complete the module. But because that wouldn't really be fair for you to see just this picture, I'll pop you back over to the real scenario, because what you actually get at the end is wonderful sounds from each of the scenarios. So that is the orgling sound of the camelid. But then in addition, they get this interactive certificate where they can place their name into a certificate, which then can be printed and could be used for credit as well if they were going to utilize that credit, which we don't have right now in our scenarios. It's not being used for credit in the classroom. Let me switch back over here to the slides one more time.